My sister-in-law stole my $8,000 wedding dress for a Halloween costume and returned it soaking wet and stained. When I demanded payment, she screamed, "I don't have that money, and you're crazy if you expect a 19-year-old to pay that." My husband froze her college fund. What Becca didn't realize was that she'd just crossed someone who understands consequences in ways her spoiled little brain couldn't comprehend. I'm not just some pushover sister-in-law she could walk all over. I'm a senior project manager at Henderson Construction, pulling in $98,000 annually, and I've spent the last 6 years learning exactly how to document everything and build cases that destroy people who think they can screw me over. My wedding dress wasn't just any dress. My parents had spent months working with a custom designer, incorporating lace from my grandmother's 1952 gown and beadwork that matched my mother's 1978 dress. Every stitch was planned, every detail was intentional, and the final cost was $8,000. Not because we were wasteful, but because it represented 4 generations of women in my family and the start of my own marriage. I'd stored it carefully in our guest room closet in a professional garment bag, clearly labeled with the bridal shop's information. Anyone with functioning brain cells would have known exactly what it was. But Becca had always been the golden child who never faced real consequences for anything. Her parents bailed her out of every mistake, and my husband Adam had been enabling her for years with his $50,000 college fund. The morning after Halloween, I discovered my garment bag hanging open and empty. My heart stopped. I tore through our house looking for that dress, calling Adam in a panic, my mind racing through possibilities. But deep down, I knew. Becca was the only other person with access to our house. When I finally reached her that afternoon, her casual tone made my blood boil. "Oh yeah, I borrowed that white dress. Hope you don't mind." Hope I don't mind. Like she'd borrowed a sweater. "That was my wedding dress, Becca," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "Oh." Long pause. I thought it was just some old dress hanging there. Just some old dress. An $8,000 custom gown with family heirloom pieces sewn into it was just some old dress to her. I told her to bring it back immediately, and when she showed up that evening, I was ready to murder her. She walked into our house carrying my wedding dress crumpled in a plastic Target bag, soaking wet and reeking of alcohol. When she pulled it out, I actually gasped. Red wine stains covered the bodice and train. The delicate lace was torn in multiple places. The satin was wrinkled beyond recognition, and dark stains that looked like makeup or dirt were ground into the fabric. It looked like someone had used my wedding dress to clean a bar floor. "Some drunk girl spilled her drink," Becca mumbled, not meeting my eyes, "and I caught it on something when I was dancing." I burst into tears, not just crying, sobbing. This wasn't just a dress. This was irreplaceable family history, and this spoiled brat had destroyed it for a stupid costume party. Adam took one look at the dress and went dead silent. That's when I knew he was beyond furious, because my husband only goes quiet when he's absolutely livid. "Get out," he told his sister. "Get out of our house right now." As Becca headed for the door, still making excuses, I screamed after her, "You owe me $8,000 for this dress." "I don't have that money," she screamed back. "You're crazy if you expect a 19-year-old to pay that." That's when Adam made the decision that would change everything. "I'm not spending another dime on her education until she makes this right," he told me after she left. What Becca didn't understand was that my husband had single-handedly saved that entire $50,000 college fund. His parents had contributed nothing. He'd been working overtime for years, putting aside money specifically for her education because he felt responsible for her future. That money was in an account with his name only. Legally and morally, it was completely his decision how to use it. But I wasn't content to let Adam handle this alone. I had resources Becca couldn't even imagine. The next morning, I took the ruined dress to Prestige Textile Restoration, the best specialty cleaners in the city. I'd worked with them before when we had flooding damage at one of our construction sites. The owner, Patricia Blake, took one look at my dress and shook her head. "Red wine on silk and vintage lace is about the worst combination possible," she said, "especially when it's had time to set, but we'll try everything we can." I also asked Patricia to document the damage thoroughly and provide a written assessment of the restoration possibilities. In my line of work, documentation is everything. You never make a claim without bulletproof evidence. While Patricia worked on the dress, I started building my case against Becca. I photographed the Target bag she'd brought it back in. I documented the timeline of events. I researched the cost of similar custom wedding dresses. I even contacted the original designer to get a professional assessment of the damage and replacement costs. Then I called my attorney. David Hartwell had been handling legal issues for Henderson Construction for 3 years. He'd seen me methodically build cases against contractors who tried to cheat us, and he knew I didn't call him unless I was serious about following through. "This is destruction of property with a clear paper trail," David explained after reviewing my documentation. "The fact that she admitted taking it without permission and returned it damaged gives you multiple legal options. Small claims court would be the most straightforward approach." "What about the family relationship?" I asked. "That's irrelevant legally. She damaged your property. The relationship between you doesn't change her liability." David also pointed out something interesting. Since Becca had used her key to enter our house without permission and taken property without consent, there were potential criminal charges we could pursue if we wanted to escalate that far. I wasn't ready to go nuclear yet, but knowing I had those options gave me significant leverage. When my mother-in-law called the next day to defend Becca, I was ready for her. "It was just a mistake," she insisted. "Becca is young and she truly didn't realize what dress it was." "A mistake would be accidentally spilling something on it while it was hanging in the closet," I replied calmly. "Taking it without permission and wearing it to a bar is theft." "That's a harsh word. She's family." "The dress was gifted to me by my parents, so it's not like you're out of pocket $8,000, she continued, which made me see red. That comment revealed everything I needed to know about how this family viewed consequences. They thought because I hadn't personally paid for the dress, its destruction didn't matter. "The sentimental value is irreplaceable," I told her. "But more importantly, when someone destroys property through negligence, they're liable for replacement costs. That's how the real world works." When she started making excuses about Becca being unable to pay, I cut her off. "That's not my problem to solve. If she's old enough to make adult decisions like taking expensive items without permission, she's old enough to face adult consequences." The call ended with my mother-in-law saying I was being unreasonable, but I could tell she was rattled. She'd expected me to be emotional and easy to manipulate. Instead, I'd presented her with cold facts and legal realities. Patricia called 3 days later with the news I'd been expecting. The dress was a total loss. The red wine stains were permanent. The fabric had been damaged by prolonged exposure to alcohol, and the tears in the lace couldn't be repaired without completely reconstructing sections of the dress. Even if we could remove all the stains, which we can't, the structural damage means this dress will never be wearable again, she explained. "I'm sorry." She provided me with a detailed written report documenting the damage and confirming that restoration to original condition was impossible. Perfect evidence for my case. That afternoon, I called a family meeting at my in-laws' house. I brought David with me. "I wanted everyone to understand the legal situation before we proceed," I announced, setting my documentation on their kitchen table. "Becca destroyed property worth $8,000. I have a professional assessment confirming the damage is irreparable. I have evidence of her admission that she took the dress without permission. This is a straightforward case of destruction of property." My mother-in-law looked shocked that I'd brought a lawyer. My father-in-law just stared at the paperwork. Becca started crying immediately. I said I was sorry. "Being sorry doesn't restore my dress or compensate for the loss," I replied evenly. In civil court, the remedy for destruction of property is financial compensation equal to replacement value. David explained their options clearly. They could settle directly with us for the $8,000, or we could file in small claims court and let a judge decide. He also mentioned that depending on how we wanted to proceed, there could be additional legal complications around unauthorized entry and theft. "You're really going to sue your own family?" my mother-in-law asked, horrified. "I'm going to hold someone accountable for destroying irreplaceable property," I corrected. "The family relationship doesn't change the legal liability." The room went silent. Finally, my father-in-law spoke up. "What exactly do you want from us?" "Full compensation for the replacement value of the dress, plus my legal consultation fees," I said. "Total of $8,500. Becca wailed that she didn't have that kind of money, and her parents looked stricken. They clearly had no idea how to come up with $8,500. That's when Adam spoke up. "And until this is resolved, the college fund stays frozen. I'm not paying for her education, while she refuses to take responsibility for her actions." The impact was immediate and devastating. Becca's college registration was due in 2 weeks. Without Adam's funding, she'd have to either take out massive student loans, drop out, or find the money to pay us and get back in his good graces. For the first time in her life, Becca was facing real consequences with no family bailout available. Over the next week, I watched the family dynamics shift dramatically. Extended family members started calling Adam, initially to scold him for being harsh over just a dress. But when he explained the full situation and the dollar amounts involved, the criticism stopped. His grandmother was particularly horrified. "She destroyed an $8,000 wedding dress? For a Halloween costume? What is wrong with that girl?" Becca tried rallying sympathy on social media, posting vague messages about family being cruel over mistakes. But when Adam commented publicly with the full story, including photos of the ruined dress, the narrative changed quickly. Her friends started asking why she'd thought taking someone else's wedding dress was okay in the first place. The social media backfire was perfect. Instead of getting sympathy, Becca was getting criticized by her own peer group for her actions. My mother-in-law called 5 days after our legal meeting, sounding exhausted. "We've been trying to figure out how to come up with the money," she said. "We could maybe manage $4,000 if we take out a loan against our car. Would that be acceptable?" I'd been expecting this. They were financially stretched and couldn't actually afford the full amount. But I wasn't interested in destroying the family permanently. I wanted justice and a lesson learned. I'd consider $4,000 as acceptable if Becca covers the remaining $4,500 through a formal payment plan with legal documentation, I replied. But it has to be her commitment, with her signature on a legally binding agreement. The idea that Becca would be personally responsible for $4,500 in debt was apparently terrifying to everyone involved. That represented about 6 months of part-time work for a college student, but it was also exactly the wake-up call she needed. 2 days later, Becca sent me a long email. For the first time, it sounded genuinely remorseful instead of just scared. "I realize now that what I did was theft," she wrote. "I violated your trust, destroyed something irreplaceable, and then tried to avoid responsibility. I understand why you and Adam are holding me accountable. I'm willing to work as many hours as necessary to pay back the $4,500, even if it takes years." She also included a detailed plan for how she'd earn the money, taking a part-time job, using her work-study income, and budget cuts to put every possible dollar toward her debt. When I showed the email to Adam, he was impressed. This is the first time she's actually taken full responsibility without making excuses. That weekend, we signed a formal agreement. Becca's parents would pay $4,000 immediately, and Becca would pay us $4,500 over the next 2 years through monthly payments of $187.50. The agreement included interest and penalties for missed payments. David drafted the paperwork to make it legally enforceable. If Becca defaulted, we could garnish her wages or take her to court. More importantly, there were conditions for Adam releasing the college fund. Becca had to make her first 3 payments on time before he'd pay for her next semester. Any missed or late payments would freeze the fund again. The signing ceremony was awkward but necessary. Becca cried as she signed her name to a legal document promising to pay us $4,500. Her parents looked mortified at how far things had escalated, but I felt satisfied. For the first time in her life, Becca was facing real, lasting consequences for her actions. The immediate results were everything I'd hoped for. Becca got a job at the campus bookstore and started working 20 hours a week. She stopped partying and started budgeting carefully. She had to explain to friends why she couldn't afford to go out anymore. Her first payment arrived exactly on time, $187.50, plus a note apologizing again for the damage to my dress. 6 months later, Becca was completely transformed. She'd become responsible with money, started taking her education seriously, and stopped expecting family bailouts for every problem. At our most recent family dinner, she pulled me aside privately. "I know I can never really make up for destroying your wedding dress," she said, "but I wanted you to know that having to work and pay for what I did taught me more about consequences than anything else ever has. I'm grateful you held me accountable instead of letting me get away with it." My mother-in-law, who'd initially been furious with me, eventually admitted I'd been right. "She needed to learn that actions have consequences," she said. "We'd been enabling her for too long." The final payment was made last month, 2 full years after the incident. Along with her check, Becca included a photo of her latest report card, straight A's, and a note saying the payment plan had taught her the value of hard work and personal responsibility. My ruined wedding dress is stored in a box in our closet, still stained and torn. I'll never wear it again, but I've kept it as a reminder that sometimes the most important lessons come from holding people accountable for their actions. Becca learned that being family doesn't mean avoiding consequences. Her parents learned that enabling bad behavior ultimately hurts the person they're trying to protect. And I learned that standing up for yourself, even against family pressure, is sometimes the kindest thing you can do. The college fund was fully restored after her 6th on-time payment. Adam continues supporting her education, but now there's mutual respect instead of entitled expectation. Most importantly, Becca grew into someone who understands that with adult privileges come adult responsibilities. She never again took anything without permission, never again expected others to clean up her messes, and became the kind of person who actually deserves the support her family provides. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's transformation. By refusing to let Becca avoid consequences, I forced her to become a better person. And ultimately, that satisfied me more than any amount of money ever could.